So, elephant in the room. You've been out of office 1 year, and Eisgruber rolled back grade deflation. Shots fired?
You know, what happens in Nassau Hall stays in Nassau Hall.
How do you feel about it? Is it you're excited or?
No, I would not say I'm excited about it.
Do you feel sort of deflated?
Happily, I don't have to take exams anymore. So really, it hasn't had a big impact on me.
Do you have any predictions for how it'll impact the university?
So I have two predictions. One is that I think students are going to be really disappointed when they see their grades. But I do think it will, more seriously, I think it'll lower the temperature on the level of anxiety that surrounds grades, which I think is not helpful. And I don't think it's helpful for learning. And
No.
You agree, Jay?
I would agree.
I thought so, given your grades.
She probably knows them, though.
She knows everything.
Okay, so you got a lot done when you were president. Like, no kidding. Residential colleges, neurology in general, arts, transit. What were your priorities when you came in 2001, and how did they change after you got here?
I think the only thing I knew I wanted to do for sure was neuroscience. You know, it's an area I know a fair amount about because it's close to my own field, and I was fairly certain that it was going to be really important in the 21st century, and that Princeton had to have a really important presence. But other than that, I was really, you know, completely open to what needed to be done, and I spent the first couple of years really just walking around, talking to people, trying to figure out where the holes were, where the Achilles heels were in Princeton, and that those sets of conversations ultimately led to things like the Lewis Center, for example. So neuroscience was about the only thing I knew for sure I wanted to do.
And how'd you get involved in your advocacy for the arts?
It's a funny story. Well, it's not that funny. I'll try and make
Brace
it
yourself.
funny. Yeah. Really, yeah, you can probably sleep through this part. But literally the day after it was announced that I was going to be the next president, a senior doing his senior thesis in the next lab over from mine kind of stormed into my office. At that point, I wasn't getting the kind of respect that I now get. And said, I have to tell you what's wrong with the arts. And I have to tell you how difficult it is to be a student who cares about the arts on this campus. Here's what we have to go through just to put on a show like this. And so that was sort of my first eye-opening experience. And then as I began talking to more faculty and more students, it became really clear that he was absolutely correct, and that we were really disappointing students, I think it's fair to say, and we were not, I think, educationally doing the job that we should be doing. So that ultimately led to more and more formal ways of thinking about it, and ultimately led to the formation of the Lewis Center, thanks to Peter Lewis of the great class of 1955.
And now you are reaping the benefits.
Exactly. This is what I dreamed about in 2001.
She signs my paycheck at the end of the month.
Are there any, before we leave the topic of your presidency, are there any regrets or mistakes that you learned a lot from that you can share for any future presidents out there?
So I would say the best advice I got from Peter Lewis, actually. In the very first summer that I was president, he and I were off trying to persuade Frank Gehry to come and design a science library for Princeton. And he said, you're going to make lots of mistakes. And boy, was he right. But as soon as you recognize that you made a mistake, correct it as quickly as you can, because don't talk yourself into thinking, well, if I just wait a little longer, it'll get better, things will fix themselves. They won't. So I made lots of mistakes. But
That's
I,
That's through my first marriage.
yeah, I'm not going there. I'm not sharing, Jake.
We'll talk about it later.
But I tried every time. As soon as I knew that I'd really done something foolish, I tried to fix it. Yeah.
So now you're teaching a freshman seminar called How the Tabby Cat Got Her Stripes, or next semester.
Yep.
Can you tell us how, or is that going to spoil the whole class?
Wow, are there freshmen in the audience?
Got one!
So this is a recruiting message. So it's a seminar on a field called epigenetics, which is a brand new field of genetics, really exciting, and explains a lot of diversity that you see in biological systems. And I've taught it before. I taught it while I was president, and I love teaching it. It's a really fun field, really fun. and I hope 15 students sign up to take it next semester.
So speaking of it, you're a professor now after being president for a while. Is that anything like if Obama were to go back to being a senator? Like, are there any parts of your power that you miss, or any responsibilities that you are glad to be done with?
Yeah, it's more the latter than the former. Yeah, I love my 12 years. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but 12 years was enough. And I'm really happy being back on the faculty and teaching and working on some policy questions. So I have no regrets at all about leaving Nassau Hall, particularly knowing that I was leaving it in the hands of Chris Eisberger, who I worked with for 9 years, is a fabulous, fabulous human being. And I think he's going to be a great president.
I think he already is a great president. That's just me.
He's growing every day.
It's the milk.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've been working on policy questions. You're also on the board of Google, which people may or may not know. How many self-driving cars do you have?
I don't have one because I think at the moment they're illegal on the road. But what I do have are Google Glass. Anybody wants to try out Google Glass, I've got a pair. They don't do much. It's nothing that I've been able to figure out. But they're sort of, a novelty.
Shirley Tilghman raves.
Sort of a novelty.
Wait, excuse my ignorance. What's Google Glass?
What?
I'm in 1950.
Are they here?
Slavic languages and literature. If they don't have it in Russia, I don't know about it. Is it like Windows?
Yeah, it's like the next.
I'll read up on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Professor Tilghman, earlier in your career, you were really you were in a pretty amazing place. You were on the cutting edge of molecular biology, right? As a lot of new tools and methods were getting figured out. Did you guys ever feel like you were playing God or about to create some hideous genetic monster? Or did you ever get close?
We never even got close. No, probably the closest I got to not doing it, but being accused of it was as a postdoctoral fellow at the National Institutes of Health. We were because we were doing recombinant DNA in the very, very early days, we were filmed by one of the networks that was trying to explain what this is. And, we spent days explaining to these reporters and being filmed in the lab and trying to be as genuine and as authentic as possible to explain what recombinant DNA is. And when the segment finally aired on the national news, it began with the picture of a unicorn and proceeded to every monster in mythology. At which point I lost confidence in my ability to explain science to the media.
I don't know, if you were able to create a unicorn, that'd be pretty awesome.
Do you see, not any of that, but what do you see as the future of the field which which you've now left, which is still, or not completely left, but which is still skyrocketing in terms of new capabilities as far as things go.
Yeah, I think there are actually many really deep fundamental things that we still don't understand about the natural world. And I think they're going to be, and this is sort of an advertisement for all you potential mobile types out there. I think there's a potential to really do fascinating, deep, fundamental scientific work. But at the same time, although I was a very fundamental biologist, I have often described myself as the oldest living molecular biologist who has never started a company. That's how fundamental I was. And but all of us ultimately want to improve, the human condition. That's why we're in the business, and we're trying to not extend life indefinitely, but to make it possible to live life as long as possible, as healthy as possible. And I see some extraordinary things happening right now in the area of neuroscience, in the area of cancer, that really suggest not that we're going to, extend life forever, but that we are going to make it possible to live healthier longer.
Is there a search for the fountain of youth underway?
There are people who seriously,
Really?
not seriously, yeah, there are.
I must find them.
Wait until you see how your body's doing at about the age of 80, and then decide.